Hello my Elven Warriors. Today I decided I wanted to make Hornet from Hollow Knight. I guess I turned her humanoid so that she'd look a little different from her video game counterpart. So I start by making an armature. Now, why does she look humanoid? Well, as a great man once said, always go thirsty. And what's thirstier than a bug person? Now that the armature is done, I begin bending all of the limbs into place for where they will need to be positioned when the sculpture is finished. And then I wrap aluminum foil around the torso to bulk up the chest so that I use less clay. Speaking of clay, I begin placing chunks of clay all over the armature to give it a thin coating, and then I bake it so that I have more body for the later clay to grip to. Now that the first layer has been added, I begin adding clay to bulk up the torso. That begins by putting a thin piece of clay on and then sticking lumps of clay where the muscles go and also where the hip bones are going to go. Then I blend the clay in with a ball stylus. Now her thighs need all the muscles slapped on in the places where the muscles would go. And then blending in with the ball stylus once again. Now I add some blobs of clay to be the calf muscles, and then I put a kneecap on and blend that in too. Alright, now she's getting her big bug booty cheeks. And I begin to carve away with a carving tool and blend in with a ball stylus. Then I add her booba, and then begin to blend so that they look more like booba and less like water balloons, I guess. I don't know. Using a sharp metal tool, I begin to add some definition around the bottom of the booba so that they have some separation, because booba don't look like that, I guess. I don't know. Now we're going to add her rib bones and rib muscles using more lumps of clay. And blend in using the metal sculpting tool from before. Right, now some shoulder meat gets added on top. And there's that, I don't know what those are called, the neck muscles between the shoulder and the neck. After shaping some clay into what looks like shoulder blades, I press it into the back and blend in using a sculpting tool. Now I begin adding the arm muscles into the place where the arm muscles go. I really need to look into some anatomy so I can figure out how better to represent muscles on sculptures. Now I add her little Tootsie Rolls and begin to blend them into the shins. Using the sculpting tool that I used on the booba, I begin to carve soles into the Tootsie Rolls. And we're going to add the cuff of the boot around the middle of her shin and calf muscle. Using a flat edge silicone sculpting tool, I begin to carve detail into the shin guards so that they have more detail and look less flat and clay-like. I carve in some battle detail and scarring on the metal because I wanted to make it look like it had been well used and worn. And then I didn't record this part either, but I used a ball stylus to tap down on top of the metal shin guards to make it look like hammered metal. I made one knee plate off camera, and then using that knee plate, I laid it on top of some clay and used it as a stencil to make the knee guard. Using rolled out worms of clay, I lay it on top of the knee guard and blend in with a small ball stylus. Using the same small ball stylus, I tap the knee plate to make it look like hammered metal. This is pretty much the technique I used on the shin guards, but on the knee pad. Using a ruler with a flat edge, I begin to cut out the belt that goes around her waist. I take a wormy boy that I've rolled out and I bend it into the shape of a belt buckle and then begin to place it onto her belt. Using a small ball stylus, I begin to press in belt holes into the belt. Taking a wormy guy, I wrap it around the middle of her stomach and begin pressing it in with a ball stylus to give the appearance of a bottom lip of a... It was intended to be a breastplate, but it's now a shirt, I guess. I don't know. You pick. And then I do the same wormy guy technique around the tops of her booba. Using a log of clay that has a hole pressed through it, I add it to the neck where the head will eventually be placed, and I begin to blend that into the shoulders. The head is a ball of aluminum foil inside some clay that I then baked and drilled holes into to put the neck and the place where her horns will go. Then I begin adding clay on top and shaping it into what her head will eventually look like. Roll out some logs of clay and then roll them into a point, and then begin to smash them onto the head where her horns will go. I take the same fine edge silicone tool from before and begin pressing in the areas where her eyes will go. Her hands are little mittens of clay that get shoved onto the wrist nub, and then I begin putting in pre-baked fingers of clay into the front of the mitten so it looks like fingers. To make the fingers, I roll out wormy guys, and then I cut the joints where all the joints in the fingers are, and then I bake them. For her cloak, I wanted to make it out of cosclay because cosclay is supposed to be more flexible and is less likely to break. I drape the cosclay over her shoulder, cut it to the length I want it, and then begin pressing in folds so that it looks like actual fabric and not clay. Admittedly, I should have found a piece of fabric to give it the texture of fabric so it doesn't just look like a flat piece of clay. And then I take a long, thick strip of clay and I place it around the top of the cloak to give it a collar, I guess, to the top of the cloak. And then I begin adding buttons onto the cloak so it looks like it has buttons to buckle shut. Using a bamboo cooking skewer, because those can be baked, I cut it down to size for the base of her weapon. Then I begin to wrap aluminum foil around the tip of the nail as to avoid making it too heavy. Eventually though, it did get way bigger than I wanted it to, and it looks less like a nail and more like a glaive or something. I wrap a thin layer of clay around the handle and then begin to roll it to smooth it out and make it uniform. Using a loop of wire, I wrap clay around that and blend it in to make it the loop on the end of her nail. I begin applying clay all the way down the tip of the nail so that it looks like a nail. Now that it's multiplied in size, I begin to add a ridge of clay up the center of the blade so that it has the nail look, and then I use a ball stylus to blend that in. Using a long, thin strip of clay, I begin to wrap the handle like it's a strap of leather wrapped all the way up the handle. It's prime time, baby. After priming the nail white, I begin to, prime it gray so that the silver paint I have will shine better on top of the gray. I add a white edge light to all of the points of highlight where there would be highlight on the blade. This shot is completely out of focus, but that's okay, right? I wrap a mauve color like her cloak, but you haven't seen that yet, so forget I said anything. Now the whole thing gets dry brushed to give it an aged, weathered look. Prime time again. Her pants get a very, very dark gray, almost black on the whole thing. And then the same black gets applied to her hands, her arms, and bits of her chest. Now her shirt chest plate thing gets mauve, I think that's mauve, all the way across it, until you can't see the white peeking through the bottom. Her head wound up being too white, so I wanted to give it a off-white eggshell looking color. Her lenses get painted black like the rest of her clothes, but slightly darker. Her belt gets a thick coat of brown. This is the best I've ever painted brown before. It really went on nice this time. All of her leather straps get the same color of brown as well. Then I use the gold paint I have to paint her little belt buckle gold. And then I begin painting all of her little metal adornments gray so that I can then paint them silver. Her boots get a nice mauve. Her cloak gets mauve as well. And the buttons get the same color of gold as the belt buckle. I begin to edge highlight everything that is silver with white paint. Then all the browns get a lighter brown for edge highlighting. And on the belt, I even go into the little belt holes, the belt loops. Her mauve shirt gets a very, very light lavendery pinky color across all the edges. And then also painted across the top of her booba so that there is like a top-down lighting going on. Her cloak gets the same pink as her shirt, just painted on all the edge lighting where there would be lighting. Now for the base, I begin to cut XPS foam into a square using my box knife. Then using a fine-tipped ball stylus, I begin to carve in stone like it's cobblestone road. Then I switch to a slightly larger ball stylus to widen the lines between the rocks. Then I grab a rock and begin the old smashy smashy technique to put a rock texture into the... After priming it, it all gets painted gray. Then I put a dark wash on top. Pat it dry to remove the excess. Then I begin to use my super fine tipped paintbrush to paint in all the grout lines in between all the rocks. Finally, I'm going to paint the edge of the base black. Stick Hornet in place, and I think we're just about done. Anyways, if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to subscribe and check out my other videos. I really hope you enjoyed. I'll see you guys later.